I shoot at your mammy, need to stand down. I up my stamina, take it to trial, get an appeal, take it to trial, pay for that casket, that's just if we whack 'em. YSL slimy and shady, watch me whack that bitch, pop 'em like a cyst, Glock with the assist. It also consisted of a song wherein Mr. Williams sang or rapped the lyrics, hey, this is that slime shit, that YSL shit, killing 12 shit, fuck a jail shit. I'm in the VIP, I got the pistol on my hip, fuck the police. You praying that you live, I'm praying that I hit, this that slime shit. 100 rounds in a Tahoe, I'm prepared to take them down. Got banana clips for all these ends acting monkey. This is that slime shit. This is that mob shit. Fuck the judge, YSL. This that mob life. Defendant Williams released a video on YouTube of a song wherein he states, I shot at his mommy, now he no longer mentions me. Act like you want war, and they gonna smoke you like a blunt. Another song, I escaped every one of the licks because I was supposed to be rich. I don't care nothing about a cop. I'm just telling you how it is. I done did the robbing, I done did the jacking, now I'm full rapping. Gave the lawyer close to $2 million, he handles all the killing. We don't speak about shit on wax, it's all my business. We know to kill the biggest cats of all kittens. In another song, I was on Cleveland, stuck like a magnet, bitch ass N-word, pay for that casket, that's just if we whack 'em. In yet another song, Defendant Williams raps, red just like Elmo, but I never fucking giggle, YSL won't fold. Pick his ass off from the balcony, wipe an end's nose. I'm going to F for the cash, then she getting robbed by Tick, a reference to Trontavious Stevens. All I ever wanted was the money, put your hands in the air if you dare. F and N, put him in a wheelchair. And even later on, Mr. Williams, and I believe that this was in 2019, made a post to YFN Lucci or Rayshawn Bennett. If I ain't like what you do for your mother and kids, I would have been killed you. And in yet another song entitled Anybody, Defendant Williams stated, I never killed anybody, but I got something to do with that body. I got the streets on my back, carry it like I'm moving a body. I told them to shoot 100 rounds like he trying to movie the body. Ready for war like I'm Russia. I get all types of cash. I'm a general. As Mr. Williams' prominence in the music industry rose, his ascension within or in leadership in the gang YSL became more apparent as he rapped and talked about the crimes that YSL co-conspirators and members committed and how he got away with robberies. With respect to the Donovan Thomas murder, the court has heard evidence through phone records that within 6 minutes of the shooting of Donovan Thomas Jr., a phone call was made from Demise McMullen's cell phone to defendant Williams' phone. And then immediately after that call, Mr. Williams calls his sister Dora Greer and then calls Kelvin Treadwell. There is then a series of calls between Dora Greer and Treadwell, and then Treadwell calls Demise McMullen or Nard. All of those calls happen within 15 minutes of the 911 call. And as I have stated before, the court has heard accomplice prior inconsistent statements about who committed the murder itself and what happened afterwards. The conflict between YSL and members of If Gang continued into 2019, wherein Mr. Williams raps the lyrics that I referred to earlier. In May 2019, a YSL member shot multiple times at a vehicle owned by Rayshawn Bennett, a black and red Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. At the time was being driven by a Milton Howard Jr. It was after that incident, later in August 2019, that defendant Williams posted on his page the language YFN, if I ain't like what you do for your mother and kids, I would have been killed you. The post was then deleted from his account. Through text messages of a co-conspirator, Marquavius Huey, there was communication between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams, both in January and in September of 2020. On January 19th, 2020, Mr. Williams sent a flyer to Marquavius Huey with the performance location of Rayshawn Bennett, or YFN Lucci. And when he sent that, he sent it with the message, "Handle that tonight, SLAT, S-L-A-T-T. Mr. Huey responded, SLAT, S-L-A-T-T. On September 2nd, 2020, Mr. Huey sent a flyer to Mr. Williams with another performance location of YFN Lucci, and Mr. Williams responded, SLATty, that is S-L-A-T-T-Y, handle and stay very low. Mr. Huey responded, SLAT, and for show, F-A-S-H-O, I've been out the way, and appreciate you for everything, my brother. Never about money with me. I'm built on loyalty. Mr. Williams responded, SLAT, handle that. I got you. Through text messages and on a separate occasion, Mr. Huey said and conveyed to Mr. Williams that he would sit down for any one of them, and I believe that to be a reference of going to jail. When Mr. Bennett was not killed in 2022, Jaden Myrick sought permission from defendant Williams to stab Mr. Bennett while Mr. Bennett resided with Mr. Myrick at the jail. Mr. Myrick reached out to co-indictee Khalif Adams, who reached out to co-indictee Demikion Garlington to get permission from Mr. Williams. Demikion Garlington was also involved in the back and forth shootings back in 2015. On February 9th, 2022, Rayshawn Bennett was stabbed by Jaden Myrick at the Fulton County Jail. And after that stabbing, Mr. Myrick reached out multiple times to Mr. Adams for some type of compensation for the stabbing. Mr. Adams reached out to Mr. Garlington about the payment for the completion. On February the 22nd, 2022, YSL co-conspirator and co-indictee Christian Eppinger called YSL co-conspirator Antonio Sumlin to get permission to finish what Mr. Myrick could not complete, that is the killing of Mr. Bennett. Mr. Eppinger asked for payment for a lawyer. However, these calls were intercepted and Mr. Bennett was relocated. In March 2022, information about the stabbing made the news, and shortly thereafter, a series of violent offenses occurred. On March 11, 2022, YSL associates Christian McMiller and Darius Ford were gunned down. Mr. McMiller is a childhood friend of Mr. Williams. Mr. Ford was also a friend of Mr. Williams. On March 12th, the day after, there was a shootout near the Cleveland Avenue area. A shooting by a YSL associate, Stephen Harris, in YFN territory occurred, and a YFN member was shot in the head. March 11th through March 14th, there were a number of social media posts going back and forth between members of YSL and YFN. One of them was a post by Shannon Stillwells. We ain't the only ones who ain't going to be crying, that's going to be crying. After a posting was made by Mr. Watts picturing him, Mr. Shamel Drinks, and Mr. Jasper Walters, on March 14th, 2022, after YSL members spotted Mr. Drinks at a gas station, Mr. Drinks was gunned down as he drove away from the gas station and waited at a red light. Later, Mr. Stillwell, Mr. Nichols, Mr. Garlington, and Mr. Farley were all charged with the murder. That is one of the acts that we are still and would anticipate the court seeing the evidence of during the course of this trial. After grand jury warrants were issued after this indictment for Mr. Williams and 27 other co-conspirators, following searches of phones, wiretaps, and other information that led police to understand the role that Mr. Williams played in the YSL street gang and enterprise. Mr. Williams' home, he was arrested at his home and a search warrant was executed inside his home. While at his home, a sale amounts of illegal narcotics, including those that he is charged with in this indictment, was found. Also found was the machine gun with which the defendant has been charged in this indictment. The gun had a switch. The narcotics included marijuana, codeine, and cocaine, and inside the home were also other guns besides the guns with a switch. The items were seized, and again, Mr. Williams was subsequently arrested, along with other YSL members at Mr. Williams' home. Your Honor, that is the evidence that I believe has been shown throughout the course of this trial and that the state would continue to show. There are several messages between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams inside the cell phone one of the cell phones that were recovered from Mr. Huey, besides the messages about tells Mr. Williams he has a new number. Mr. Huey asks Mr. Williams, hey, my brother, I'm fucked up. You ain't got nobody I can pull up on and have something in my pocket. Mr. Williams responds, slat, let me call BEO. Mr. Huey responding, slat, I need you, my brother. Mr. Huey saying, asking whether or not a lawyer was going to go and talk to another YSL associate, asking Mr. Williams to send him some money to pay his lawyer off. Mr. Williams asking Mr. Huey, who had been accused of armed robbery, what did he want? Mr. Huey responded with a number. Mr. Williams responded, "Slat." After Mr. Williams stole a star ring from one of the victims in the indictment, he asked Mr. Williams, "Do you have a star ring?" Mr. Williams said, "Yes." Mr. Huey said, "Slat, you can't cash at me $500 so I can make a payment to my lawyer." Mr. Williams responded, "Slat." Mr. Huey sent him his phone number. Mr. Williams assured him through his responses, Slat, that he would take care of them. Throughout Mr. Huey's phone, you see messages of this nature between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams. The court, again, will hear that as this trial continues. The recommendation that the state previously made prior to us reaching this point was made with the hope that Mr. Williams would agree to certain special conditions of probation that we asked him to adhere to, and that he would take ownership and responsibility for being the leader of YSL. Given that those negotiations have broken down, we are asking that the court sentence Mr. Williams as we have asked earlier. And prior to the court imposing a sentence, we would ask that Ms. Shawana Edmonds, who is the mother of Mr. Thomas, be allowed an opportunity to make an impact statement. And that is all that we have, unless the court has questions.
Okay, well, given that Mr. Williams is not charged with the murder of Mr. Thomas, I don't think that that is applicable here.
I checked on that, Your Honor, with respect to count one. As a co-conspirator, Mr. Williams is responsible for all of the acts of the other co-conspirators, the overt acts. The overt act of the murder of Donovan Thomas is one of those acts.
I know, and this trial is not complete, and so y'all have not yet proven that. Not to mention that you dismissed the murder charge against one of the co-defendants who already fled. So,
not for that case, Your Honor. That was that was Mr. Drinks.
Okay.
We have not dismissed any.
All right. Well, if there is a conviction on the RICO or murder count following the close of this trial, that would be the appropriate time for the victim impact statement to be made. All right, Mr. Steele or Mr. Adams, does the defense want to put anything on the record? Obviously, you need to make a recommendation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Many of the statements made by the prosecutor we vehemently disagree with. The prosecutor misstated many pieces of evidence and then took liberty that that is the state's theory. Mr. Williams has tendered a nolo contendere plea to the RICO conspiracy count. And in that count, there are several overt acts. And the first one, Your Honor, deals with a traffic stop. It's on September 9th of 2013. And I won't go through every one because it might take a long time. But just for completeness for this, the court knows, Mr. Williams is driving a car. There is a dash cam video of the stop. The officer who testified at the trial 11 years later, the case was a gun was found under the passenger seat. Mr. Williams is not tied to the gun. He's not convicted of that. And the dash cam video that the officer said would have picked up sound as well as definitely video was never turned over to us, supposedly lost. Could not explain the loss. The armed robbery in another overt act of Mr. Dodson, D-O-D-S-O-N, has the following information. The state only, because we haven't called witnesses yet. So the state put up a man who said nothing except, "I don't recall." And then they put in his prior recorded jail calls. That man was taken, his name is Mr. Bean, B-E-A-N. He was taken to Grady Hospital, and he was spoken with by a detective. The state vehemently accused me of lying to the jury, that the man never went, Mr. Bean was never taken to Grady Hospital, and that somehow I planted on him to say something on a recording where he said the reason I implicated Jeffrey Williams is because the police told me that it would be easier for me. Then I had to go through the CAD reports and show that Mr. Bean was in fact taken to Grady Hospital, and Mr. Bean on recording told Detective Quinn, who of course told the truth. Yes, when I spoke to the detective previously, I did lie. Then what the state doesn't tell the jury is that there's another man in the car. He is shot at the scene. He's arrested. He pled guilty. His name is Fred Prethro, P-R-E-T-H-O. And Mr. Prethro is in the Georgia State Prison System, easy to find. And Mr. Prethro was in Grady Hospital also, unfortunately suffering from a gunshot wound. And you can hear the medical equipment behind him. And Detective Williams came in and was recording the whole conversation and said how many people were in the car. And Mr. Prethro names the people: Adrian Bean, who's the gentleman I just said, himself, and Walter Murphy. Are you sure there weren't a fourth person in the car? No, the three of us. The state doesn't call that person. The state does call Detective Williams. So I wanted to ask and inquire on that. The state, to obstruct, if that's obstruction, asked the predecessor court to prohibit me from getting into the fact of any conversation that would have impeached another witness. It's fine. Fred Prethro's on my witness list as well as the detective, and I have the recordings. In addition to that, Walter Murphy gave a statement while in the hospital, and his statement is very interesting. It's two different police reports, signed the same date, which is September 11th of 2013, and on the first 7 lines of the police report, they're identical. Then all of a sudden, when it gets to, on the right-hand police report, it says Mr. Murphy stated that there were 3 people, I believe, I have to go back, in the vehicle. On the other police report, it states Mr. Murphy stated there were 4 people. There's no reason that they should be different. They're both signed the same. The state doesn't call that officer at all. I tried to ask Mr. Murphy about it. The state objects, and the predecessor judge sustained the objection. Mr. Williams was not involved in the Mr. Dotson. Miss Bennett, that was Mother's Day, May 12, 2013. She reports allegedly an armed robbery. The detective who testified here and investigated stated he never took out arrest warrants for Mr. Williams. And he wrote in his police report, Miss Bennett is not truthful. That is the case that the state is talking about. The state then, there was Brady evidence that they don't turn over, and we find out about it in court after they arrest Miss Bennett because they say she's not cooperating, and it comes out that she told the prosecution over and over again that this did not happen the way that she reported it, and she doesn't remember. As to Donovan Thomas, and Mr. Williams has nothing but empathy, sympathy, and sorrow. They were friends. It is a lie. What the prosecution has put before this jury is a lie. What happened here is the prosecution comes up with a theory because they need a motive, they think. I know you don't need a motive in reality to prove a murder case or any other case, but they wanted a motive. So they made it where Mr. Williams and a gentleman named Rich Homie, his name is Mr. Lamar, he's a performer, and Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were close. There are public documents, recordings, Mr. Lamar being interviewed almost every year, and then he talks about his time with this band or group called Rich Gang, and he says every year up to this past year, he, God forbid, died, we can't call him as a witness, how close he is to Mr. Williams. The state, though, made it in this case, or tried to make it, that Mr. Williams and Rich Homie are enemies because Rich Homie will not sign with a record label that has nothing to do with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams doesn't sign to that record label. That record label is owned by a gentleman named Brian Williams, also goes by Birdman, wildly successful. He started Drake's career. He started Mr. Dwayne Carter, performer known as Lil Wayne's career. He started Nicki Minaj's career, just fabulous, powerful person, well respected in the industry. But the state wants it to be that Donovan Thomas interceded. and would not let Rich Homie Quan sign to Mr. Brian Birdman Williams. And that is the reason that Jeffrey Williams had a feud and killed Donovan Thomas. Your Honor, what the evidence would really show if we kept going to trial, and I could tell you that Mr. Adams and I never thought we'd be in front of this honorable court. We always thought it would go all the way through trial. Was the state is saying that Rich Homie Quan and Jeffrey Williams don't speak since the fall, and they have a bad relationship the fall of 2014. We would have shown, and we served on the state, December 15, 2014, Jeffrey Williams in a private plane with Mr. Lamar or Rich Homie Quan, and they are high-fiving and laughing with each other. That is on audio video. There's a man who the state hasn't called yet, Mr. Martinez Arnold, also known as Duke. It's on the state's witness list. He's represented by the Honorable Ashley Merchant. He's on that plane as well. He would have identified the item, and he would have testified that Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were very close in December 2014. Then on December 29th of 2014, Mr. Williams, Mr. Rich Homie Quan, Mr. Arnold, others were at Brian Williams' home in Miami, Florida. There was a posting by Mr. Lamar, Rich Homie Quan, and a picture of Mr. Arnold and Mr. Lamar, and they said, Mr. Lamar says, "This is my number one man, Duke," or something to that effect. We would have put that into evidence. In addition to that, Your Honor, on December 8th, 2 days before Mr. Thomas, God forbid, was killed, Mr. Williams is with Mr. Thomas, as well as Mr. Sledge and Brian Williams in Brian Williams' tour bus outside of a fabulous entertainer, artist, Mr. Clifford Harris, T.I.'s studio, and at that time, they were very close. But you also have the detective with the gang unit, Detective Underwood. I asked her within the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, did you do any, and she was on the gang unit the entire time, including today, and I asked her, do you have any evidence about Mr. Williams and Mr. Thomas being close friends? And she said, yes, of course I knew that. I said, how about in January of 2015, close to the time of Mr. Thomas's death? She said, yes, they were close friends. Mr. Michael Sprinkle, he's a deputy district attorney in the Fulton County DA's office. He has a recording with Mr. Treadwell. You've heard the name O.G. Bentley. And in that, they're going through the evidence. And Mr. Treadwell, it's important because he has a child, too, actually, with Mr. Thomas's sister. So he's family. And Mr. Sprinkle states this is 2018, this is after the rental car, this is after all of the interviews of Mr. Copeland, this is after the interviews of Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle's in some of those interviews with Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle on tape, on recording, states, I do not know why anybody thinks Jeffrey Williams is involved in this killing. He and Donovan Thomas were close friends. It makes no sense to anyone. And Mr. Williams was never arrested, never charged, even in this, as the court just noted, with anything to do with Donovan Thomas's, God forbid, killing. In addition to that, Donovan Thomas has a place that he used to stay with a group of people on Auburn Avenue. Jeffrey Williams performed and did a music shoot there to try to help other people who are suffering in poverty to get out and to be able to be seen and to broadcast their music. Jeffrey Williams does that for everybody because he comes, Your Honor, from the struggle of total poverty, seeing people killed. He saw his brother die right in front of him, and the law enforcement, I'm not blaming anybody, everybody's on edge, but law enforcement would not get any help for him because there are all these people around. It is just, what Mr. Williams has gone through is wrong for everyone. It's not just Mr. Williams, it's that whole community, but he's trying to get people out of poverty and out of that community. I have been with Mr. Williams, where we have gone to speak with children together, and he tells them, don't be a rapper. Be like Brian, be a lawyer, keep in school. He tells his children, get your education. His family, his whole being, Your Honor, is trying to break the chains of poverty for others, and it has been spun in this courtroom with false statements and allegations against Mr. Williams at every turn. In addition to that, Your Honor, the state talks about the fact that Mr. Williams takes people to Miami. You would have heard evidence if we went forward. I put all these people on my witness list. Not one person on my witness list has been interviewed by law enforcement or the prosecution. They have investigated this case for 15 years. They haven't interviewed all these people. That Sprinter van that you heard about, that was already booked days before. Going to Miami, Florida, Mr. Williams and Mr. Brian Birdman Williams, they did a video shoot for a music video. If anybody would have gone further with the expert for the state, they would have seen that Mr. Williams' cell phone does not contact any of the co-defendants that are named here in Miami, and Mr. Williams stays at a separate location than any of those persons. He would always take people who can't afford it on airplanes, on buses, on tours, to his concerts. He let everyone go because, Your Honor, they never left that area. He wanted to show people you have an opportunity. The world is big. Mr. Williams gave jobs to everybody who'd want to work. He'd give them jobs and security, and I'm not insulting them. They really weren't their jobs, but they were being mentored, but they were given titles and tried to give them respect and opportunity. But if they did not wish to work, Mr. Williams would not allow them to work with them. This has all been turned on its head by the state. The fact that the state has put in Mr. Williams' lyrics are offensive. Mr. Williams has tens of thousands of recordings. On our witness list, we are bringing in all of his people, his recording artists, his engineers, his managers, his record label, and an expert, the Honorable Dr. Eric Nielsen, to talk about how Mr. Williams creates his music. His music is then changed around and merged. Mr. Williams, some of the lyrics you just heard are not even uttered by Mr. Williams. The state has no idea when these lyrics were made. Some of them were made before the shooting of Donovan Thomas that the state is saying this applies to the Donovan Thomas killing with the Tahoe. They are so far afield of where we need to be when we are trying to, God forbid, take somebody's liberty, Your Honor. The state is talking about things like F the judge and I rep my life for real. That's not even said by Mr. Williams. But they don't care to find out. They are on a tunnel vision to try to convict a man who should not be convicted. The statement about I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with that body. If the state just bothered to talk with anybody, that is a Nicki Minaj song with Jeffrey Williams. It is written by Nicki Minaj. That is on the text messages I gave, not the text message, the Instagram or Twitter rather, that I gave to the state. That is out well before this, but the state doesn't care. This was out in 2015 or 16 or 17 or 18, I can't remember, I think 18, where Mr. Williams was asked who wrote anybody, and his response is anybody was written by Nicki Minaj, and it was. But it was really written and sung, it's a takeoff of a song by Tupac. There's a song that it parallels, which is an inspiration. But here we are with the state. Also, I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with the body. The next line comes up is, it's a truancy body. The state can't explain that, so they just conveniently leave it out. Your Honor, there were wiretaps on this case. Mr. Williams, it was going to come out, there was an application to wiretap his phone. The state never presented to a judge. That speaks volumes. The leader of the YSL criminal street gang, who's been involved from 2012 until his arrest, and even according to the state while we sit here, they never even tried to wiretap his phone. It might have been because they don't really know what his phone number is. So all these communications you're being told about with Mr. Huey, I'm not so sure the state could have gotten anybody to say that's Mr. Williams' phone. This is how the trial has gone for us. But we sit here for almost 2 years since we did our jury selection initiation on January 4th, 2023. Mr. Williams has been sitting in a jail since May 9th, 2022. This is 2.5 years waiting for the conclusion of the state's case and a verdict from the jury, and that's why he is tendering this plea. I'm telling the court this, and the court knows when you came out the first time, it's very hard for Mr. Williams. I am not supportive of what we're doing right now. I'm not against it. But I told Mr. Williams, you okay with me saying this? Yes. I told Mr. Williams that I think we're winning the trial and we should go to verdict. But he told me I can't wait another 3 months if there is any possibility I could go home because I have children that are hurting. I have things to do, and he has some medical issues that he would like to tend to. He eats out of a bag, Your Honor. He eats processed food only. He gained 75 pounds during trial. He's lost it since. But it is hard. You know, for me, it's only 3 more months. It's enjoyable, actually. I enjoy coming. It's not that enjoyable for Mr. Williams. He told me he wakes up. Can I say this? Yes. He wakes up every day, and it's another day in HE blank blank. Your Honor, the state is talking about, in this case, they put in social media. This honorable court was not here, but the state put in that Mr. Williams, in the indictment, Mr. Williams put out a call for murder. He put $24 million murder for hire on a person's head. That is a lot of money, and that is awful. If they would have read the chat, the Instagram chat, Mr. Williams, right above it, there's a picture of a very well-known, very accomplished musical artist who actually had surgically implanted in his forehead a pink diamond worth $24 million that day. That's what Mr. Williams would talk about. That's the type of evidence that is coming from the state of Georgia in this case. It is wrong. This is all wrong. And I know we're pleading guilty, and I know we're pleading nolo, and I know we're asking this honorable court for a certain sentence, and we'll get to it with the court's permission. But this is the type of evidence that there is. But it is holding this man hostage. And that's not really what we're supposed to do, district attorney time, in the state of Georgia or anywhere. The state then, because I opened on that, then they never bothered to put in all of the chats. Why did it take me to read the chats? In addition to that, going back to Donovan Thomas, talk about Mr. Williams involved, the state did a geofence. A geofence tracks his devices. It doesn't have to be a phone. It could be an iPad. It could be any type of electronic device that targets and is used. You don't have to be on the phone. It's the contact. If he has an app open, it'll capture it. And the state targeted the McDonald's, where they keep saying that Mr. Williams met with people there. They targeted the barbershop where, God forbid, the killing occurred. And they targeted a third location, no, 2 locations. And it comes out, Ms. Williams' devices are not there. It's exculpatory. I don't get that information. I got that because I interviewed Lieutenant Crabtree, and the results can't be found, according to prosecution. I did a motion for that. They just can't find it. That is great evidence for Mr. Williams. It would have also shown clearly that when he does go down from his house after getting this call that I'll talk about from Demise McMullen, he's not with these other people. And the expert for the state, the FBI agent who does the telephone analysis, Mr. Williams' phone does not ping off the same tower as a Demise McMullen or a Mr. Copeland or a Mr. Garlington or whomever. The state of Georgia has misrepresented for 2 years in front of this jury. They have hidden evidence. They have violated Brady. They have falsely accused Mr. Williams. Your Honor, saying that Mr. Williams gets that call 7 minutes after, the state said 6, it was 7 minutes after the killing of Donovan Thomas from Demise McMullen. Mr. Williams was already out of his home. Mr. Demise McMullins is calling Mr. Williams. He's not even there. He's going down to meet with Mr. Kelvin Treadwell, also known as O.G. Bentley. O.G. Bentley was supposed to go to Miami, Florida. They were talking about this deal. And Mr. Williams, that day, he was given another contract. Mr. Williams, by this time, he went from zero money. He is a multimillionaire at the time. He doesn't need the Cleveland Avenue drug deals for $15. He doesn't need the shootings. He wasn't even living in Atlanta since 2018, 19, 20, 21. He came back the very end of 21, 6 months, and he got arrested in May of 2022. In his house, Your Honor, we have everyone on the witness list. There are 12 people living at that house. Mr. Williams opens up any of a car that he has. He'll rent cars for people. Any home he has, he will allow people to live in hotels because people that he knows, unfortunately, are homeless. And he gives them all places to stay, cars to drive around. He is not involved in criminal activity. Mr. Williams just got back in our country. His passport shows it. Right before he was arrested on May 9th of 2022, there were other people in that house with the drugs and the guns. There are people whose the guns are in their names. They were going to come in court and claim the guns. Everybody else was doing as well, but Mr. Williams has entered a guilty plea. I'm not going back on that, but I just want you to know that this case is just wrong to do to somebody with no bond and to hold him hostage. He wants to, you may not do it. He's aware of that. He's aware of that. But the state offered him 15 years on probation. But they keep piling on these conditions. He just said, he made up his mind. He said, I'm just going to go with it. I got to get home. Judge may not let me home, but I'm not doing these conditions and admit that I'm the leader and I'm involved in the killing and my music just promoted everybody to do it. He's not going to do that. So he did not do that. And that's how we wound up here. The state, the night of the killing, people came to Mr. Williams' home. The state tells the court, he said, lay low. What they don't tell you is right after that, he gave money to Mr. Sledge, who said, they're going to kill me. They think I did it. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with it, I don't want to be with you. And Mr. Sledge said, I just need a hotel room with my children and my bride or my significant other to get to. And Mr. Williams said, be safe, lay low. That's the lay low. In addition to that, Mr. Williams told Mr. Copeland's with the police. Hours after the killing of Mr. Donovan Thomas, Mr. Copeland goes to the police department. Mr. Williams is the person who told him to go. Mr. Copeland said, what do? They're shooting at my house, at my family's house, at my significant other's mother's house. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with the murder, get out of here. Mr. Copeland denied it. And Mr. Williams said, then go tell the police. Mr. Copeland said, you want me to go to the police? And Mr. Williams said, if you had nothing to do with it, they think you did it, go to the police. In addition to that, Mr. Copeland said, well, I'm going to retaliate. Mr. Williams told him, don't do that. Let 12 handle. That's on recordings. That is on recordings on January 11th of 2015 with Detective Thorpe. Your Honor, as far as Dwayne Carter, a performer known as Lil Wayne, Mr. Williams had no conflict with him. They are friends. We were presenting evidence that right before this shooting of the tour bus is April 26th of 2015. Mr. Williams is performing in New Orleans area. Then that's the area where it's Holly Grove, where Mr. Carter, or Lil Wayne, a performer known as Lil Wayne, comes from. And in order to drum up popularity and interest, people get on the internet and they start what's called rap battles, arguments, feuds. That's what happened here, and you would have heard testimony from Mr. Williams' management that they said, start a rap battle. It'll be better for your career. Mr. Dwayne Carter is aware of that. Mr. Dwayne Carter is interviewed. The state's aware of this. He has interviews after this. Are you mad? What's the real deal with Jeffrey Williams? He states, no. He's great with me. He brought popularity to me. He loves me. He idolizes me, and I love working with him. They did an album together. In 2014, they're in the studio together, making music together. It is all made up that Mr. Williams is involved. Mr. Williams gives a statement. The state refuses to put it in and then stop me, the previous judge, from cross-examining the detective. His name is Racy. He met with Mr. Williams in the DeKalb County Jail on the 15th day of July 2015. Mr. Williams is arrested that day. And there's a long interview. And Mr. Williams waives his right to counsel. He tells them, I'm his lawyer. They say, you don't want to speak to us? You don't have to. He said, well, I'll speak with you. And they asked Mr. Williams these questions. What about Lil Wayne's shooting? He said, it was outrageous. I love him. That's my idol. I love Lil Wayne. How about this battle? He says it's promotion. They asked him about his rap lyrics. It's the only person that the state ever did anything about rap lyrics with. And they asked Mr. Williams, what about the rap lyrics? And he tells them, it's hyperbole. He didn't use that word. He used the word, it's made up. It's rhyming. It's made up. Not like the state is saying that I rap lyrics for real. That's not even Mr. Williams' utterance. Your Honor, the point I'm trying to make to you is what the state of Georgia has presented to this jury in this courtroom the past year has been full of untruths, and they know it. The state says that Mr. Williams had a conflict because he named an album with Dwayne Carter, and Dwayne Carter didn't like that. Dwayne Carter's interviewed. He said, that was one of the nicest things anyone could have done to me. It shows how much he really appreciates me. It shows respect and honor, and I appreciate what he did. The state knows this. With regards to Jimmy Winfrey. What the state did is they put in a recording. It's not Mr. Williams. It's a jail recording, Mr. Winfrey and an unknown person. And an unknown person says, when you get out, you're going to get a Porsche and $250,000. Mr. Williams not privy to that. The state looked at all of Mr. Williams' bank records, everything. They undressed him financially. There's zero evidence Mr. Williams did anything for Mr. Winfrey. The state tells you that Mr. Winfrey asked for money for a lawyer. The conversation was, and it's recorded, it was with Mr. Williams' manager. And Jimmy Winfrey said, I need to show that I was gainfully employed for the court. Can you get me something from YSL? And the manager said, yeah, if we have it, and if it's true, yes, you can have it. That is it. There's no evidence that Mr. Williams paid for anybody's lawyer, Mr. Winfrey or otherwise. In addition to that, Your Honor, the social media postings with Mr. Rashawn Bennett, also known as YFN Lucy. So Mr. Williams, the state tells Mr. Bennett on social media, I would have killed you if I didn't like the way you take care of your mother and children. That is the post. What they don't tell you is Mr. Bennett, who is also, to his credit, trying to drum up his career. Mr. Bennett is picking on Mr. Williams, who's a much higher profile artist than Mr. Bennett at that time. And Mr. Bennett is saying that he slept with Mr. Williams' fiance, while Mr. Williams and she are a significant couple, that Mr. Williams' music is awful. Nobody should listen to his music ever. Mr. Williams responds by saying, we can do an album together if you want. Stop this. The man continues of how he's sleeping with Mr. Williams' significant other, and then Mr. Williams responds by saying, I would have killed you except for what you do. That is the context that they don't tell you about. And Mr. Williams did nothing to Mr. Bennett. In fact, the evidence would have shown, if we had time or we would would have gone forward, that Mr. Bennett and Mr. Williams are on the red carpet receiving awards in California, sitting right next to each other and taking photographs. This is not the Jeffrey Williams. Jeffrey Williams is a known person who is all over the place. If he did something, somebody wanted him, they can find him. This is not he is not hanging out on Cleveland Avenue. What the state is saying are not true. The situation with Mr. Bennett, so he's in the Fulton County jail, and he's housed, and there are crazy, sick, violent people, and they're on the phone, and Mr. Myrick, M-Y-R-I-C, is calling other people, supposed co-conspirators. How much will Jeffrey Williams give? He doesn't say that, but that's the theme of it, as well as Christian Eppinger. What the state doesn't tell you is that when Mr. Sumlin is asked, hey, find out how much Thug will pay me to kill Mr. YFN Lucci, Mr. Sumlin says, I don't know his number. I can't get in touch with him. He doesn't talk to me. And that's because, Your Honor, since 2015, and he means no insult, but Jeffrey Williams has had zero contact with Shannon Stillwell until this case, Kenneth Copeland, Demikian Garlington, Justin Cobb, Demise McMullen, Mr. Sledge, Mr. Murphy, all these people. This is a lie. This is a 100% lie, and that's why we tendered a no-low plea to being a leader of a criminal street gang. Mr. Williams is not a leader. In fact, if it would go forward, on Mr. Huey's phone, there are conversations with Mr. Copeland. And they both say how Jeffrey Williams is a zero, and F him. And they don't talk to him, and Jeffrey Williams never does anything for them. Mr. Huey, Mr. Williams met later. He met him closer in the time of 2020. Mr. Huey's father went through a horrible episode that Mr. Williams knew, and that's how Mr. Williams knew his son, who's Mr. Huey. And Mr. Huey's on hard times, and Mr. Huey's making mistakes. And Mr. Huey, supposedly, Mr. Williams believes, armed robbed a man named Chandler Durham, D-U-R-H-A-M. Mr. Durham is Mr. Williams. He's a fabulous record engineer. And Mr. Williams states, give him back, tell him to give back the property or he's going to die. The state puts that as an overt act. No one dies. The property doesn't get returned. Mr. Huey ignores Mr. Williams. The state told you today that Jeffrey Williams sent Mr. Huey a posting that Mr. YFN Lucci is going to be performing on January 19, 2020. That's not true. Mr. Huey sent that to whoever phone that was. And all it says is slat and slatty. Well, I went out to the places that Mr. Bennett was supposed to perform. There's no shooting. There was no fight. There was nothing to report. There's nothing here. In addition, the state says same thing on September 12th, September 2nd, 2022 on Mr. Huey's phone. I'm not conceding that was Jeffrey Williams even having a conversation with him, but even if it was, it doesn't show anything. It says slatty, lay low. Lay low means don't do anything. Get out of the way. That is what it is. That is Mr. Williams' role. Mr. Williams, there is evidence in the record, and there would have been more. He takes people on tour with him. He takes people in the mall with him. But when they do crime or do things to people, for instance, there was a prostitute, and several people gave that prostitute money, $500. And the prostitute, at the end of the $500, getting $500 from several people, had sex with a person, and then she was armed robbed. So all the money came back. Mr. Williams wasn't involved in that, but he heard about it. He made those people find the prostitute and repaid her every dime. People stole from stores that Mr. Williams found about. He went to the stores and he repaid all that. He didn't steal anything. He doesn't need to steal anything. Your Honor, Mr. Williams stands with Elton John. Elton John called Mr. Williams the next coming of John Lennon. Mr. Williams is unbelievable talent. He's not just a rap artist. In fact, when he's interviewed in 2017, he gives a statement and he says, I had to learn rap. He grew up in a house learning other forms of music. He likes all music. But rap hit in his community, and his community raised him. They supported him. They came out to him. They made him get into establishments, and once the establishment saw all the people come out, he got more establishments. And then he went out of that little area in Atlanta to other parts of Georgia, and then to all the neighboring states and throughout our country, and he has performed on every continent but one. He has performed in front of being the headliner, 300,000 people at one time. He has a real life and career. He is not the leader, and he is not worried about buying jewelry that is stolen. Mr. Williams is actually innocent. I'm not trying to corrupt our plea. That's his plea, and he's entitled to it, and he wants it, and he embraces it. But to me, this is a wrongful prosecution. This is outrageous.
All right, so you're pleading guilty, or your client is pleading guilty, to counts 57 through 62.
It's all true.
Do you
Yes, there's
concede
a
factual basis for those counts?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. And, Your Honor, I'll answer any of your questions, but the point I'm trying to make is 45 years to serve 25 years in prison, when just this morning it was a probationary offer. It was a probationary offer. The state knows, but they want to control. They have this theory of music, and they want to stop Mr. Williams from making music, from entertaining, just stop his life. That's just not right. And it's wrong of the district attorney in Fulton County to do that. If they offer probation, then he's not a 45 to serve 25 years in custody type of person, and he's certainly not the person that the state has stated in front of the court. What we're asking, Your Honor, on count one, which is the RICO count, to accept the nolo contendere plea. Please sentence Mr. Williams to 20 years to serve 5 years in prison commuted to time served. Mr. Williams has served, as I said, 22.5 years. On count 56, Your Honor, that's the leadership of a gang, nolo plea, 20 years to serve 5 years commuted to time served, consecutive to all other counts. On count 57, which is a gang count, Your Honor, not a leader, guilty plea, 20 years to serve 5 years commuted to time served, concurrent with count one. With regard to count 58, which is possession of, I believe it is marijuana with intent to distribute, 10-year sentence on probation, concurrent with count one. On count 59, which is violation of Georgia Controlled Substance Act, possession of codeine with intent to distribute, 5 years on probation, concurrent with count one. On count 59, Your Honor, which is violation of Georgia Controlled Substance Act, possession of cocaine, 3 years on probation, concurrent with count one. Count 61, 5 years of probation. It's a firearm count, consecutive to the other counts, consecutive to before count 56. And then count 62, 10 years to serve commuted to time served. That should be a total sentence, Your Honor, that we are respectfully requesting the court to consider. I believe it's 45 years to serve 5 years in prison, commuted to time served, 40 years on probation, credit for the time already served and community time served. As I said, after 3 years of probation, the probation becomes non-reporting, and after successful completion of 10 years on probation, the balance of the sentence be terminated. Mr. Williams asked the court for house arrest for 3 years as part of the sentence, but house arrest specifically defined that Mr. Williams will be in his home or at any lawful employment, touring, studio, performance, business meetings, and the like. Wear an ankle monitor for the first year and pay the costs of same, and the company must be approved by probation department, and the ankle monitor to be affixed within 10 days of hopeful release from custody. As Mr. Williams cannot possess a firearm, but he can be around licensed security who are armed or other persons who are lawfully carrying a firearm with a license, and that would be knowingly for Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams can transfer probation outside the state of Georgia. He has residences in the state of California. He has studios in the state of California. Mr. Williams be allowed to travel throughout our country and the world for lawful work-related industries. Mr. Williams wants to perform. He's going to do this anyway, Your Honor, but we made it part of the sentence. At least one concert each year at a venue, if they'll have him over holding 10,000 people, if that is workable for the venue and Mr. Williams' management, and he is going to donate all of the profits that he makes to a 501c3 charity. Mr. Williams wants to pledge $100,000 for the next 3 years to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office if they will hold an illegal firearm buyback to buy back firearms that are not supposed to be on our streets. Mr. Williams does not wish to go near the Cleveland Avenue area, not to insult that area at all, but it is just not a good idea under this circumstance. And he can drive on the highway, but otherwise not come within 1 mile of the area that we call Cleveland Avenue, and we can give the exact dimensions of that area. Mr. Williams must perform 100 hours of community service per year for the next 3 years as designated by probation department. Mr. Williams can associate, and this was agreed to previously, with people who are convicted felon or alleged gang members solely for lawful purpose of making music.
All right, I see Ms. Love shaking her head, and I think it's fair to establish that until the entirety of the negotiations were agreed to, it was all up in the air.
Sure.
That may have been something y'all had already hammered out, but it wasn't. It's not anything they're bound to.
Absolutely.
Fair. Okay.
I agree with that. Mr. Williams can have no contact with any of the supposed victims, and there was an Exhibit A attached to the state's proposed plea agreement, negotiated plea agreement that was sent to you, so we adopt that Exhibit A, but we can give it to the court if you need those names. And Mr. Williams have no contact with any of the co-defendants in this indictment, with the exception of Mr. Quantavious Greer, that is his biological brother, as well as Mr. Sergio Kitchens. He's a phenomenal artist. He goes performer known as Gunna, G-U-N-N-A. Mr. Williams and Mr. Kitchens are contractually obligated, and they frequently perform music together. Your Honor, any other conditions that this honorable court deems appropriate? I want to thank the court for all your time. Always, I want to thank Ms. Percival for everything she has done. I want to thank Mr. Williams for allowing me to stand with him. And I really never thought we would be here, but this is his decision. I want to thank the Honorable Keith Adams, who may want to speak, Your Honor, but I can never imagine a better lawyer than Keith Adams.
Mr. Adams, do you want to add anything to the record?
Your Honor, I don't know that there's really much to add. Mr. Steele has represented to the court, I think fully and thoroughly, the breadth of our knowledge of the case Mr. Williams' background. I think the court has not just heard it from Mr. Steele, but has had the opportunity to sit here and hear some of the evidence and kind of get a feel. You've had a chance also to observe Mr. Williams and then get a feel for him, his background, and so forth. You know, the only thing I can say about Mr. Williams that hasn't been said is that he comes from an area. You might have heard throughout the course of the trial that there was an album, a concert tour. We came from nothing. And that is true. Mr. Williams came from, you know, I hate to use the word abject poverty, but that really is the case. Came from an area where there was a significant amount of crime, where, as you've heard, he's had tragedy in his life and has observed tragedy in his life, and he has gone through a good bit. He has been involved in a lot, but he has raised himself up. He has done the best he could and has done phenomenally well, and is, I think, an inspiration to a lot of people from that community who look to him and see the success that he has gained and have been fully supportive of him. But he finds himself here. He's in front of you. He is tendering this plea because he accepts responsibility. You have heard everything that Mr. Steele has had to say. I can only ask that you follow what we have put before you. You also have, I believe, the paperwork that was given to you by the state, which kind of gives you some idea of what they were looking for as well in terms of conditions on Mr. Williams if we were to ever reach some sort of agreement. And we ask that if you feel that there is anything within the state's proposal that might be appropriate in terms of the sentence for Mr. Williams, that the court please feel free to do that. There is nothing that he puts himself before the court. And I think 2.5 years sitting, going through this process, challenging the process, but now standing before you and asking that you consider everything and sentence him appropriately in the way that we've requested, I'd simply ask you, I'd join Mr. Steele and Mr. Williams in asking you to do the same. And I thank you as well, as Mr. Steele did, for your patience with us and for bringing some order to the proceedings that candidly was needed. So that's all I have to say. I thank you again, and I ask you to consider everything that's been put before you.
All right, Mr. Williams, is there anything that you want to say?
Yes, ma'am. I take full responsibility for, my crimes or my charges. I want to say sorry to my family, my mom. My mom got 11 kids. I can't say all their names, my managers, my kids that's not here. Really everybody that got something to do with this situation, I want to say sorry for just having so much time investing into this, and I am a smart guy, I am a good guy, and I really got a good heart, I find myself in a lot of stuff because I was just nice or cool, and I understand that you can't be that way when you reach a certain height because it could end bad, and it don't really have to have nothing to do with you, but it could end bad and it could, fall on you. And I know the choice is yours, it's up to you, and I hope that you allow me to go home today and just trust in me to just do the right thing and never see you again unless it's at a bar in the future or something. Just out of this type of situation, I promise you I won't ever be in this type of situation again. I'm going away. I've learned from my mistakes. I come from nothing and I've made something and I didn't take full advantage of it. I'm sorry. Through these last 2.5 years of my life, you are really, truly, honestly, the best thing that has happened to me because you made everything fair for me and everybody involved on both sides, I'm sorry to the sheriff, everybody for just having to put extra time in. I know y'all got paid more money, but I'm sorry for y'all having to put this extra time in to be away from y'all family, and I just hope that you find it in your heart to allow me to go home and be with my family and just do better as a person. I know what I bring to the table. I know what I am. I know the heights I've reached. I know the impact I got on people, period, in the community, all people. I learned that late, like these past 2 or 3 years of my life, I kind of learned that late. And maybe it was because I was, probably on drugs or anything, I don't know. But I have came to my senses and I understand what I mean to this world. But I am a good guy, I don't mind doing stuff like, free shows, and I always did that. I did free shows and gave it to single parents, millions of dollars. I made $1.8 million on a free show, and I gave it all to single parent charity. And I did like 2 or 3 shows that made like $700,000 a piece, and I gave it to the breast cancer organization. Like, I do things. Like, I put millions of dollars back into my community for real. I really did. I did more than anybody ever did from my side, But I understand, rap lyrics. I understand how it could be twisted. I understand what it could do to the mind of people. I understand all that, and I promise you I'm 100% changing that. It's just, I'm older, I'm grown now, and it's just like, I'm smarter. It's more things to rap about. Like, I've experienced a lot of good things. I experienced more bad things, but I experienced a lot of good things too. And anyway, I can go forever. Well,
I appreciate it. And I appreciate that you do realize how much of an impact you have on people. It's past your neighborhood. It's worldwide, especially young people. And having come up from where you came up from and living in and around that, that gangs are damaging to our community. And it may be that a whole lot of rap music and the rap industry is, honestly, it sounds like a modern day version of kind of WWE wrestling that used to be on television, where people would just get up and posture and act like they hated each other. And it may be that that's a lot of what is going on in the music industry with rap. But whether it is fake or not, it has tremendous impact on kids and young people who think, this is cool, this is what I want to do, look at him, he's a millionaire, I can do that by being, a gangster in the streets. And that's not true. What you're likely to have happen to you if you're a gangster in the streets is you get shot, you get killed, or you get thrown in prison. And those are, by far the most likely outcomes. And, you've been in here watching the trial, and you've seen the pictures of Mr. Ryan posing with a gun as big as he is at 15 years old and going out and shooting and killing another teenager. And that's what gangs do, and that's unfortunately a lot of what rap music does. And if you are a modern day John Lennon, he might have rapped too in this day and age. I don't know, but I know you're talented, and even if you choose to continue to rap, you need to try to use your influence to let kids know that that is not the way to go, and that there are ways out of poverty besides hooking up with the powerful guy at the end of the street selling drugs. And, I know that happens for protection sometimes, but a much better way would be getting an education and hanging around with people who set a good example. And you be one of those people that sets a good example. All right, so that's my high horse on that. I could also go on. But I want you to try to be more of the solution and less of the problem. All right? All right. So it is not lost on the court that the state, had they been able to come to agreement on certain special conditions, was willing to entirely dismiss the RICO count, was willing to entirely dismiss one of the gang counts, and was willing to entirely dismiss this, machine gun count. Was willing to give a sentence that permitted Mr. Williams to walk out of the door today, and therefore does not seem to be particularly worried that Mr. Williams, if on the streets, would be a danger to society. I'm taking that into consideration in crafting my sentence. And in permitting a NOLO plea to the RICO count and one of the two gang counts, I would not be permitting the NOLO to the one if you were not pleading guilty to at least one of them. But you are, and y'all admit a factual basis for the counts that you are pleading guilty to. I find there to be a factual basis for those counts, and for the remaining counts with which you are charged, I am going to impose a sentence, and I've taken a little bit of the suggested special conditions from the defense and a little bit of the special conditions suggested by the prosecution. On count one, the court sentence is 20 years to serve 5 years, commuted to time served, the balance of 15 years to be probated, and a $25,000 fine. On count two, the sentence is 5 years to serve, commuted to time served. That's the minimum sentence that's permitted on that count. It is required to be run consecutively. I'm going to run it consecutive to count one, but I am going to backload. Oh, I'm sorry, that is not commuted. That is 5 years to serve, and it's going to be run consecutively to count one, backloaded, by which I mean after you serve your 15 years of probation. If you have been successful on that probation, and I sincerely hope that you are, then at the end of that 15 years, I will commute the entire rest of any service portion of your sentence to time served. So I'll get to the end of it and give you the total sentence, but I'm also going to impose a $15,000 fine with regard to that count. Count 57, 20 years to serve 5, commuted to time served, the balance of 15 years probated, concurrent with count 1. Count 58, 10 years to serve 5, commuted to time served, balance probated, concurrent with count 1. 59, 5 years to serve, commuted to time served, concurrent with count 1. 60, 5 years to serve, commuted to time served, concurrent with count 1. Count 61, 5 years to serve, that is required to be also a consecutive sentence, so that's going to be run consecutively to count 56 and backloaded. Count 62, 10 years to serve, also required to be served consecutively, that's going to be consecutive to count 61, also backloaded. So essentially, the total sentence is 40 years to serve the first 5 years in prison, but commuted to the time that you have already served, followed by 15 years on probation, followed then by the backloaded 20 years, which can be served in custody and will be served in custody if you are not successful on your probation. If you are successful in completing your 15 years probation, that will be commuted to time served. You are to remain on reporting status for the first half of your probation, active reporting for the first 7.5 years of your probation, and that is pursuant to OCGA 17-10-1, subsection 2A. And Mr. Steele and Mr. Adams, in order to keep him on reporting status, there needs to be good cause shown. We all concede that good cause is shown here?
Stipulate.
All right, I appreciate that. Special conditions of your probation.
What good cause? What do you mean?
Can I have a second, Your Honor?
Sure.
Let the judge. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. You had enough time to talk with your attorneys?
Yes.
Okay. All right, special conditions of your probation. After 48 hours from your release, you are to stay away from the metro Atlanta area, and that's defined by the U.S. Census Bureau. It may change, but you can look that up anytime to figure out what that is. For the first 10 years of your probation, subject to the following exceptions, you are permitted to be in the metro Atlanta area to attend any wedding, funeral, or graduation from high school, college, or graduate school of any of your immediate family members. And immediate family members is defined the same way that you all were contemplating it when you were negotiating. You can get here up to 24 hours prior to any such event, and you need to leave within 48 hours after any such event. In addition, during each year of your probation, I'm going to require that you come to the metro Atlanta area and make a live anti-gang and anti-gun violence presentation 4 times a year, each year of your probation, at a grade school, a middle school, a boys or girls club, anything like that, that type of group. And if you want to, that presentation can include a benefit concert, and these presentations may count towards your required community service hours, which I'm going to impose, that during each year of your probation, you perform 100 hours of community service. You are, and this is required by the fact that there's a gang conviction. You shall not knowingly have contact of any kind or character with any other member or associate of any criminal street gang. Exception to that, if your brother is a member of any street gang, I hope you talk him into getting out of it. Quantavious Greer, and then also Sergio Kitchens, as long as you are contractually obligated to him. That is going to include anybody who is named in this indictment, except as absolutely necessary to conduct the lawful business of your musical career, and to any extent that the state is not agreeing to the exception for Mr. Kitchens. In the event that that part is not enforceable because it is only a portion of a special condition, going to provide that that be severable from the rest of this, and I'll put some case cites in the Senate sheet for that. You are in no way to promote any criminal street gang or any criminal street gang activity, including on any social media platform. You are not to utilize any hand signs, terminology, or language that promotes any criminal street gang. You are not to participate in any criminal street gang activity. You are not to knowingly engage in any contact with any of the victims that are listed in this indictment or with any of their family members. And you may not have in your possession or with arm's reach any kind of a firearm because you're going to be a convicted felon. And that is, except I know that you have security and you need security. You can be within arm's reach of a firearm that is in the possession of either licensed law enforcement or licensed security personnel that are in your security detail or anybody that you're performing with. You are to submit to random drug screens and not use any drugs unless they are prescribed for you by a licensed physician. You are to execute a Fourth Amendment waiver that will permit the search of your person, residence, vehicles, and electronics for any firearms, any criminal street gang paraphernalia, or any illicit drugs. And as I mentioned with regard to one of the first of your co-defendants from this trial, at least since I've been involved, to plead guilty, our Uniform Superior Court rules instruct and provide that it is absolutely proper for a judge to grant leniency in sentencing when, quote, the interests of the public and the effective administration of criminal justice are served, unquote. And I think that this plea is in the interest of the public and in the interest of effective administration of justice. Have been trying to ensure that, to the extent I can, this trial also abides by that. It's been challenging at certain times. I find your plea to be freely, knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily entered with an understanding of the consequences, and I accept it as such. I also need to inform you that your attorneys were going to represent you through either the last day of this term of court or 30 days from now, whichever is later, and any of the filings that were mentioned that need to be filed within that time, they would file on your behalf unless they are permitted to withdraw from representing you before that time. I am not going to impose the conditions suggested by your counsel about the benefit concerts and the donations to the sheriff's office, but I certainly strongly encourage you to do those things and to do and continue to do things that benefit your community and especially help young people to stay out of criminal trouble. And unless there is anything from counsel other than that.
I have one matter, Your Honor.
Okay. And does the state as well?
Yeah. Yes, right.
Your Honor, with regards to Mr. Williams being permitted to come to the Metro Atlanta area or Cleveland Avenue area for a funeral or the other items,
right.
Can you also consider, God forbid, there's a serious medical condition of a person that
in
is
his immediate family,
yeah.
Certainly we can add that. And I also meant to mention, because I know you do travel all over in order to pursue your career, that it's permissible for your probation to be transferred to out of state, and that has to be done through probation, but that is fine with the court. And you may also keep your, nobody's mentioned it, but keep your passport and travel out of state and internationally to the extent that you need to do that for business purposes as well. All right, Mr. Body.
Yes, just very briefly, and thank you. The district attorney just wanted me to urge the court, due to the fact that the Thomases have been negatively affected incredibly traumatically by what has been discussed by both parties here today, to make a brief statement as she believes that they fall within the exception or within the bounds of Marcy's law. If the court would allow, I understand the court made a ruling earlier as it relates to that, but she wants
All right. Thank you. And I appreciate, well, I cannot even begin to understand what they must, anybody must be going through when they lose a family member to violence or criminal violence. Mr. Williams himself has expressed his own sorrow to the family. I, again, am going to stand by my belief that the appropriate time to hear a victim impact statement from them is at the close of the trial that contains the murder count with regard to their family member.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Court is adjourned. Good luck to you. And I'm going to have there better be no violations, but if there are any, you're coming back to see me.
No.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Hey,
but since the offers for Mr. Kendrick and Mr. Stillwell are expiring today, we will offer the record.
Let's take a recess, and I'll be back in